everybody a good evening. I'm here at the Campfire Radio, and I'm thinking about how much I miss the swamp sometimes. I've moved upstate a bit, a little bit further up the peninsula, up home, but there are times when my mind drifts back to down south and to the swamp, and the things I miss about it. I mean, there are sights, there are smells, all kinds of things that I to miss about it. It's a different place. It's really another world compared up here where I'm from. But I'd like to, and also I think about the project I've had with Hydro Bob for the last few years. While he was always the driver, I always found our exchange and our partnership something of value, but it was never really about us. It was more about both our vocation, really, our love for the big cypress country and for the swamp. It is and thinking about like the ongoing, the trilogy, we reached that milestone where the trilogy is finished. The story is resolved or unresolved. You could say, it never really had a resolution. It kind of gets the reader, kind of leaves the reader a lot to think about, which is, I think, all books, all literature, if done well, does so. And, the story itself, I think about how that story began and how it was very, very simple. And it started on a drive home from one of our campfire talks. It had to do with Bob, because the plan was that we were going to perhaps, take the show on the road, the campfire talk, because it was an innovative campfire talk. We were hoping, at least South Florida and for the Centennial, maybe beyond that. The mechanics just weren't there. It didn't quite work out that way. We didn't, part of the problem was we had responsibilities back where we were working. And, that made it difficult for things to really come together in that sense. So we never ended up taking it on the road. But while driving home one night, and a campfire talk like that can be a production. You have to be on your, it's like a show. You have to be on your game. You have to have your acting chops, your singing chops. We had a few, and it could be exhausting. You were exhausted by the end of the night, having performed. But by the end of the show one night, Bob forwards the idea. He was talking. He said, why don't we, if this gets going, he said, why don't we have a little storyline, like it was almost like a program that you would give out to the audience, perhaps, kind of telling, kind of the major players in the there are only two players, but, explaining the different songs, elements of the, swamp ecology, some of the content, some of the figures in the songs they were all about someone, and or a certain vocation, be it a superintendent, be it a botanist, or invasive species management, hydrology, firefighting, things like that. And that's really where the genesis of the book started. And Bob and I began, the writing stemmed from talks, basically face-to-face, Bob and I talking, writing down ideas. We'd meet, and we met at McDonald's. We'd meet at a park. We met whenever we could. We both had responsibilities. We both had, other things going on. So we built on that. We built on those, and those earliest exchanges, I think, were the most productive. Those were Bob really laid out the ground on which all these characters and situations would develop. Kind of he built the skeletal framework. Actually basically rolled out the map and gave it some contours, here and there, the setting, what we wanted to do with it, where we wanted to go. But our conversations really, that back and forth, talking about, especially things like character development and setting. We talked about setting. We talked about, for example, the idea that, Rusty, the protagonist, was a veteran. He wasn't just a teenager. He wasn't just he would go off to war. He'd be deployed or join the army, sent off in the desert. We talked about that. That was the earliest. Starts with him being and then we decided on a few other characters, where originally the figure of, Rusty's father was interesting. But what we did was we split him. At first, he was a guy, Bob said, well, it's a guy in a boat. It's a guy with a boat named the Queen Bee, and he's out in his boat. And this is the Rusty's father figure. I said, no, we can't. He was kind of bland and uninteresting, like other people's father, like a guy in a boat. I said, well, why don't we what we did was essentially we split the father figure into two. You have two different, for example, where you have, the father who's kind of the responsible, work-a-day, hard-working, morally upstanding in a very conventional way type of fellow. And then on the other hand, you have this mysterious outlaw style of figure that, that is which ends up being a character by Rusty's biological father, who is out in the, who's only seen on summer vacations, and it's not known exactly, too much about it. We don't reveal too much about him. He's kind of a man of few words and a man of, he's there in another sense, kind of the main character, his sense of adventure, Rusty's sense of adventure and mystery and exploration, which we also explore further in the book. But I got a tremendous amount out of those meetings. And I think those meetings really is one of the things that really bore fruit. As my involvement became less and less, because, for different reasons, later on in the process, I feel good about, being fully present, being able to fully have the time, the energy, and the ability to contribute in that sense. I think those early moments really were a springboard. Now later development, in the creative process was kind of patchy, difficult to get together. We were in the carpool, which helped, and then the carpool. But I think what really became problematic was not so much that we didn't use the carpool anymore. We didn't see each other, get to correspond as much in person. Was the run, our campfire run, basically our run of when we were doing the campfire talks. I think that made a world of difference while we were actually doing the talks. When we were doing it, that was really my high point at that particular job there. That was the high point of my creativity, and I think Bob as well, and I really couldn't have done it without him. I mean, it was like the idea, you know, in doing those talks. I mean, at first, I'd never done anything like that. I'd never done living history. I'd never done anything even approximating that. I'd taken a couple acting classes in college. That's about as close. We did a, kind of a production. That's as close as I ever got. Bob largely wrote a script. It was scripted. There was a little bit of ad-libbing. We later on incorporated some of that ad-libbing into the talk, but yeah, Bob wrote a script and we went with it. And at first, we met in Bob's office to go through it, and this was like just right before opening night, right before we did the first Campfire talk. And we did a rehearsal in Bob's office, and I was terrible. I was absolutely terrible. I was flubbing it. Bob was like, I think he must have been mortified, because we'd gone over it and gone over it and gone over it, and by the time we were, and we were going to go over it one more time on site before it, kind of a dry run. And when we did that dry run, I think it was myself and a volunteer were there. I think it was Squid Snyder, but yeah, I launched into it, and it was, I just kind of found found my acting chops, and then we took it from there. And it was the first Campfire talk was very, very well received. People were asking about it. I remember they'd come in and ask about Campfire Charlie the next year. So it was great. It was and it was like I said, just a milestone, a high point, and definitely in my career in that particular field, absolutely. And also, one of the things, as I said, to wrap it up, that I miss about the swamp was that time, a few years ago. That was really a high point. Going, setting up, performing that program, and getting that feedback, and kind of preaching that gospel. That made the day.